So you remember how I talked about in last week's episode review about the world building and how it was done through the television ad that was being catered towards, like, kids and stuff? Well, this episode does it again, but takes it to a whole other level by giving us a little bit more insight, even more insight, with this dystopian world and how there is so much more propaganda than we actually believed, and also some potential foreshadowing for the future of the story. So let's get into it. So basically, this little television ad that was very brief towards the early portions of this episode hints that these executioners love to do stealth operations, undercover operations, and deal with criminals, or Akudama in this case. And with the way this is introduced, it is implying that this is either A, going to happen within this story, or B, it has already happened within this story. And let me explain. Remember what I said in my previous episode review? I said that our main female character, the swindler, I'm starting to believe that she is probably an undercover executioner. Now, hear me out. It would fit the fundamental themes of her being a swindler, but on top of that, it would make a lot of sense narratively for a twist like that, especially from someone that has written, Danganronpa. It makes perfect sense. However, we might be looking too deep into it. Maybe this is just something that's going to happen eventually, and maybe it's not even our main female character. Maybe it's another character or part of the group. Maybe the hoodlum, the one that is kind of getting really in deep with the other guy that's brutish strength and all that and incredibly strong. That also feels like a possible case. Or even the doctor that is a part of the squad. She might be an actual executioner too. Whatever the case may be, though, there is definite hints that there is going to be a plot with an executioner either sneaking into the group or is already a part of it. That is definitely what that television ad was trying to foreshadow. But another thing that also gave us was that there is people within this society that is watching this of young age that are being told about life and death. If you're bad, you will die, etc. Your life is forfeit. It really is painting this world in a way to keep people on the right path. Basically, if you don't follow the proper norms of society, you will in fact end up dead. And this is a fear tactic. It's very clear by the way that ad was done. It was a fear tactic to scare individuals at an early age to be able to go down a path that, society would actually like to see, or slave a society, whatever. So I find it fascinating. It's definitely a good way just to show how a lot of individuals in this world has probably been corrupted or has their viewpoints very warped against certain things or norms that we would probably find normal in today's society. It's really cool. It's a really nice way to do world building that isn't a character regurgitating things and explaining things that everybody else already knows. Just fitting it in seamlessly with a television ad is so perfect with this type of world that's broadcasting this stuff like 20 plus times a day to people of all ages. So anyways, enough of that. Let's actually get into the swindler and talk about her character. So I'm going to disregard the fact that she might be an executioner or whatever, okay? I'm just going to disregard that because that's left to be seen. We'll see where it goes. And at this time, we don't really have too many hints if she actually is one. So what I really want to talk about is her descent into villainy, or descent into an Akudama. What I'm trying to mean by this is that when you look at this episode, she actually starts to reflect. The character starts to reflect of how far she's become from where she normally was. Like, she's become disconnected from her normal life. When you see her peering out over the city and she starts to wonder about how far she's come now in these past few episodes, you can see sadness. You can see that she realizes that she's no longer going down probably the path of justice, a right path anymore, and she's going down a path of absolute evil. And she realizes at this point there's probably no turning back. She's basically become an Akudama because of just what she has done now. So her life is effectively ruined. She has realized now this is pretty much a point of no return. Regardless if she has been dragged into this against her will, there's no way to really justify her being there and intermingling with all these criminals for this long and still being alive. So it definitely does make her seem very suspicious. And we even see an image board behind the scenes with the other executioners that her picture is plastered on the Akudama list, which I do find fascinating though, that they didn't really talk about her, Akudama, bounty. not really being non-existent. They didn't mention that whatsoever. We didn't even get to see an update on maybe her record. So that is a big detail that I would like to point out. I wonder if that's going to be dived into in the upcoming episodes. But the point though is that you see her realizing that there's just no turning back, and she starts to take initiative and go down this path of villainy throughout this episode, especially when she initiates to be able to break through the barrier. She uses, the robot ball to sling it and all that at the end and press the button, but also to be able to get into the box to bypass security to be able to get inside of the train. It just shows that she is making up for her being a part of the group, but she is now doing something that's so despicable technically in this society that she, like I said, she is now never going back. It's very reminiscent of Black Lagoon, which is one of the reasons why I mentioned it when I first did my first impressions on this series. It's reminiscent of that. The main female character feels so much like the main male character of Black Lagoon, where he loses himself. He's like a goody two-shoes, a good guy in society, and then he becomes a criminal. And that's what's happening right here in this story. So fundamentally, I'm loving the character. Just to get to the main meat of things, I love the character, and I love her growth and how she is actually becoming incredibly important to this team's future. Which, by the way, I do want to point out something. She was very athletic. I might have forgotten from the first episode, from her actual origin, but I'm like, whoa, how are you able to throw like a robot ball so well through all the barriers like that to be able to hit the button? I'm like, that's just a good arm. That's a good throw. It does feel a little bit off. It feels very off with her being able to do something like that to such an extent. It feels very inhuman in a way, or something that just seems very off, especially for someone that's not really been in a lot of physical activity, and someone that seems to be very weak in terms of climbing stairs. Does make me wonder if there is more truth to this whole swindler ordeal, which is what I've been talking about. Narrative-wise, I wonder if they're building up to that. Maybe she is unaware that she's even swindling people, that she's probably swindling her own self. The ultimate swindler would probably be able to swindle themselves. So, who knows? Towards the middle half of this episode, though, we have a lot of tension building up. Basically, the operation to break into this station and be able to get inside of the train and go and on their travels. It's kind of like the midway point of their operations, kind of like a gateway to go to where really needs to be done. You even have the cat at the end of the episodes, like, this is where things start to get serious, start to get very hard. This is when the operation becomes fully underway. So everything that was in this episode was child's play. It was baby stuff in comparison to what's potentially going to come. So it's amping up the stakes, but at the same time, it does let us know, though, that these criminals really are incredibly good at what they do, because nobody's really ever been able to get to this actual very point. Which, by the way, speaking of getting to this point, I would like to talk about that EMP that went off that shut down the entirety of the city and the station. That's an incredibly powerful device that, that cat got a hold of to be able to, for our team to use. It does make me wonder exactly who this mysterious individual is. The more and more I think about it, the more I kind of analyze and theorize about what's potentially going to happen in the story, the more I believe that cat, the one behind the scene that's actually talking through the cat and all that, is probably someone in the higher up city, the city for the rich people, the city for people that are kind of the ones that won the war. I feel like that is an individual that's probably of someone that is of a very royal birth. I have a feeling like it's a person that just wants to change the upper society, or maybe the individual is actually evil and just trying to make society into what they want. They actually just want to obtain all the power for themselves. Who really knows? But I do feel like there is something very shady going on, especially having a device that is actually able to EMP the entirety of the town to such an extent. That's kind of ridiculous, because I don't think you could probably get your hands on something to that extent. I don't even know if the hacker boy would be able to do something as extreme as that for an entire city. That just seems absolutely ridiculous. Which, by the way, speaking of which, I do want to talk about the strength of one of our characters and how he was actually ripping out pillars out of the ground to break past the barrier. I kind of mentioned this briefly in my previous episode review, that there has to be augments, like enhancements to their bodies, and I do believe that this episode is heavily implying that now. There's no way that some of our characters are able to survive certain damage they're able to do, or be able to rip up literal pillars, stone pillars from the ground to break through the barriers like what we saw within this episode, without some form of cybernetic enhancements. I wish that this series would dive dive a little bit more into that. If there's one thing that this series is not doing a good job with, is definitely diving into that. Now, I know it's kind of like a no-brainer, that's definitely stuff that's probably within this society. I mean, it's common sense. You have a cyberpunk world that's set in the future, dystopian future, with all this technology. It's common sense. It's common logic that the characters definitely would have kinetic enhancements. But it's still nice narratively if it would be mentioned, and we get a little bit of a rundown to the limitations, and also why he's so insanely strong, and why doesn't other people get these type of cyberkinetic enhancements? It makes me wonder. I mean, is he just an outliner? Is he like someone that his body is so rare and so unique that he's just able to deal with that, and that normal people wouldn't be able to? Is he even human? I mean, we might not even know that. He might actually just be a full robot for all we know. Who really knows at this point? I'm very curious about some of this development going on behind the scenes, these little elements of world building, and the series has done a good job with that. I'm praising it for, like, the TV ads it does. I would also like stuff on that as well. Which, by the way, another thing I do want to talk about is just the atmosphere of this episode. The atmosphere is definitely really tense, and I think that the series did a good job with building up the tension in its own way, with the situation of both teams having to hit the button at the same time when there was a time constraint. You know, not a lot of series can really do this right. Usually most series try to make it so tense that it just, like, it gets a little bit funny, or just, like, really, like, you don't care anymore. I didn't think this series really had a problem with that. It actually did a good job with building up the tension for the button scene within this episode. So yeah. But overall, I think Akudama is becoming quite a good series. It's definitely standing out, personally, to me. Once again, it's sad that this is not a popular anime from this season, even though I think it's literally one of the best of this anime season. The art style, animation, voice acting, etc. It's so good, and I wish more people would take notice of such a fantastic show that I know many are kind of making it in its shadow. Like, Akudama's like in the shadow of these other great series. But I'll leave it at that, though. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.